So welcome to this wonderful afternoon. My name is Rudison-Imhotep, and I am the board chair for the African American Museum of Iowa, which is located in Cedar Rapids. This year, the museum is celebrating a bunch of things. We're celebrating 30 years in Iowa of the African American history that began here many, many moons ago. And if you have an opportunity to get to Cedar Rapids, I would encourage that because the museum has been renovated. We just completed a $5 million renovation, and we're in the heart of Cedar Rapids, and it's a beacon for the entire state for history and education. So, I have a list of things that I was given to do today before we get started. So I would like to thank a few organizations that made this possible, the Black Agriculture and Farming Series. First, our series sponsor is Silos and Smokestacks National Heritage Area. And today, from Silos and Smokestacks, we have Rick Wooten. And Rick, I'd like you to come up front and have a few words.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I am Dr. Rick Wilton. I'm the Vice Chair of Silos and Smokestacks National Heritage Area on the Board of Trustees. I am delighted to be here today to lend our support in bringing to you the second of 3 tremendous learning opportunities in the Black Agriculture and Farming Series. Silos and Smokestacks National Heritage Area is one of 55 federally designated heritage areas in the nation and is an affiliated area of the National Park Service. Through the development of networks of sites, programs, and events, our mission is to interpret farm life, agribusiness, and rural communities, past and present. In preserving and telling the story of American agriculture and its global significance, we and our partners are committed to telling the story of American agriculture from many different perspectives. Both the history and future of agriculture are diverse and cannot be shared without recognizing contributions by all races and cultures with respect and dignity. And so, therefore, it's my pleasure to represent Silos and to provide yet another great opportunity for us to learn the fascinating agricultural story of our country. Enjoy.
Thank you, Rick, for that. We appreciate your partnership. And we also would like to thank the Des Moines Public Library for opening its doors for this event. So Dr. Rudison-Imhotep is coming to teach us and educate us on some things. And I will introduce him momentarily. But before we do that, I have some additional announcements on behalf of the museum. The museum is partnering with some other organizations as well to put on and host some additional opportunities for learning. The flyers are on the back table at the doorway. You'll see that. So after the conclusion of the event today, I encourage you to grab the flyers, and if you can participate in these events, please do so. One is the Conscious Cash Financial Literacy for Families. It's a 2-part series that will be happening in Cedar Rapids, but you will be able to join online if you're here in the Des Moines area. And that is sponsored by Corda Credit Union and the African American Museum of Iowa, as well as Invest in Me, strengthening mental, physical, and financial health in partnership with the Cedar Rapids Women in the NAACP. And lastly, the mini golf with a history lesson. That sounds like a lot of fun. It's going to be at Twin Pines Golf Course, again in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. June, July, and August, and that's in partnership with Shelter Insurance, the museum, African American Museum of Iowa, and Cedar Rapids Parks and Rec. So all of these flyers will be on the back table, as well as a flyer that gives you information on today's series and the final part. So after today, there will be one more part of the 3-part series that Dr. Negus is leading on Black Agriculture and Farming, and it will be on Sunday, June 16th on Father's Day in Cedar Rapids at the African American Museum of Iowa from 1 to 3. And he will be covering Justice for Black Farmers Act of 2023. So that should be a nail biter, or whatever you call it. It's really good. All right. So we're getting closer to the part you all came to hear. I'd like to introduce to you our lecturer. Dr. Negus Rudison-Imhotep is an executive board member for the Greater Des Moines Habitat for Humanity, a former City of Des Moines Civil and Human Rights Commissioner, and the former deferred expulsion case worker for the Des Moines Public Schools. In these roles, he has connected several of Central Iowa's top employers with highly skilled, untapped talent, assisted hundreds of marginalized Central Iowans in securing gainful employment, and successfully advocated on behalf of more than 50 students who faced expulsion from Des Moines Public Schools. Dr. Rudison-Imhotep, also known as Dr. Negus, is also a sought-after orator and community ally, having served as an executive board member for the Iowa Human Rights Board, a past chair and commissioner of the Iowa Commission on the Status of African Americans. In 2015, Dr. Negus launched Rudison Consultancy Group, LLC, to offer cultural community network advising and cultural competency training to agencies and organizations across the region. His commitment to educating emerging leaders is what led him to teaching positions at Hawkeye Community College and Joshua Christian Academy. Dr. Negus holds a bachelor's degree in the liberal arts with a concentration in political science from Excelsior College, a master's degree in public administration from Norwich University, and a doctorate in business administration with a concentration in human resource management from North Central University. I welcome and encourage you to welcome Dr. Negus-Imhotep.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time being here today. And first and foremost, I want to give honor and respect to the ancestors, because without them, we would not be here. And what's so important about this date is that on this date, in 1925, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, better known as Malcolm X, Malcolm Middle, today was his birthday. And that's why I said this is a special day as well in regards to the subject matter in which we're dealing with today. The topic is African and African American carceral farming and animal husbandry. Some people, the term carceral means prison. We're talking about prison farming, and we're going to go and move forward in the slide. Within the slide, as we said, this is the agenda in which we're going to speak about, looking at the history of carceral farming in America. The prisoners in the U.S. are part of a hidden workforce, and a lot of us are not aware of many of the brands of food that are connected with carceral farming. And how does this topic affect the populace? Those are the three main points we're going to touch on in this particular presentation. Next slide. The history of carceral farming. Historically, Africans and African Americans were portrayed not only as a redundant, low-income group of people that affect normative society, that stigmatization of being African American underlies the perpetuation of the Jim Crow sanctions. We also see that mass media amplifies the message that African Americans are considered an evil influence on our society. As Michelle Alexander stated in her book in 2020, The New Jim Crow, she stated that the McKenzie versus Kemp law in 1987 constitute a decision which endorsed a comparative harmonious example of the response of a racial caste system to this day. She compared it to the Dred Scott decision as well as Plessy versus Ferguson. She also states that the 13th Amendment really helped to establish the legal criteria for mass incarceration of those who had previously been enslaved. When people were emancipated from the plantations, they had no place to go. And then local governments created vagrancy laws. And if you were vagrant, you were caught and you were brought back to prison, and then you were enslaved. Will you click onto this video? Thank you.
When we talk about the wealth of the South, we're talking about wealth and its. When we talk about the wealth of the South, we're talking about wealth and enslaved human beings. In fact, those enslaved human beings in the pre-Civil War period range, depending on the year, between 15 and 20% of the total wealth in the U.S. That means that enslaved people are worth more.
One moment. It was working fine when I tested it.
Talk about the world.
Okay.
Look at it. Okay, here we go.
When we talk about the wealth of the South, we're talking about wealth and enslaved human beings. In fact, those enslaved human beings in the pre-Civil War period range, depending on the year, between 15 and 20% of the total wealth in the U.S. That means that enslaved people are worth more than all the factories, all the stocks and bonds, and all the currency combined. In the 1850s, an enslaved young man about 18, 19, 20 years old in New Orleans goes for anywhere between $1,000 and $1,500. If we account for inflation, that $1,000, $1,500 actually is equivalent to about $230,000 to $250,000. It's a ton of money.
And they are sold with no particular consideration to parentage.
You can't tell me to leave my family. I ain't going nowhere, people. You understand me?
There are very, very few cases where it disturbs the property relation. Men might acknowledge the biological tie, but they don't often recognize the kinship tie.
Thank you, George. Chicken George has skill. As one gentleman to another, I'd like to buy the boy from you.
Because slavery is so central to their economies, they become very invested in making sure that slavery persists. And so that's where you get things like the idea that slave status is heritable through the line of the mother. The slave societies of the Americas are the most brutal and oppressive because they went so far in the direction of making slavery an enclosed system. Different states passed laws trying to limit the freedom of slave owners to free enslaved people. But much more often, there were stipulations that a person who was freed had to leave the state within 90 days, within 6 months. That reflects a fear that free black people, simply by virtue of being free, are dangerous to a slave society. And if you have too many free black people kind of functioning in your community, they advertise the possibility of freedom to the enslaved population.
Just finding the power within that system to survive took a tremendous amount of courage. And it really is a testament to the human spirit that African Americans were able to survive that system and ultimately to be able to do great things coming out of that system.
It's time your family paid with that.
Thank you. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, we see here the Maryland Doctrine of Exclusion, as well as the 1740 South Carolina Negro Act. The intentions of the founders of the United States were focused on commerce and trade. Their ultimate objective was to maximize profit. People of African descent were commodities. So having a low to no-cost workforce expedited farming purposes. Before farming could start, the vast majority of Africans who were enslaved deforest a lot of the populated area before they could farm. And looking at this, we can see, estimate that the contribution of carceral slave work and the output and the growth of the United States during the first half of the 19th century was crucial to building like a building block for a better understanding of the contour of slavery and capitalism. Existing situations to this day, we still see that present picture is potentially problematic. We use the data from carceral or enslaved persons for this particular purpose to look at what happened in the past and look at what is happening to this day. Would you go to the next slide, please? We're looking here at the post-antebellum culture. As we stated, during 250 plus years of slavery after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1863, and then with the ratification of the 13th Amendment in 1865, we see basically that people who were once slaves were converted into another form of slavery. It was the survival of the plantation system, and the emergence of sharecropping was one of the most economical factors affecting the South's agriculture and the post-Civil War period. Three important things that we need to look at, these particular themes. You see that the history of the Southern agriculture after the Civil War, race and the transformation of the labor system from slavery to sharecropping to wage labor. The environment concerned some of them of the South with their own making and growing certain crops that was destroying the land over tobacco and over farming of cotton deteriorated the ground. So that's some of their own doing. And we see that agriculture is a serious business and it's a science. So we need to look at how we utilize the earth, what we put into the earth. So we go to the next slide, please. In this particular slide, we see right here, dealing with the black population, as I stated, we're dealing with blacks who are incarcerated. That's what this topic is, and the farm work that they do. Would you click on that for me?
Listen, may I just start by reading the relevant part of the 13th Amendment and get you to explain why it has been such a sort of a misnomer. So it says, in part, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Khalil Muhammad, I had never understood that phrase and how it perverted, in fact, the cause of banning slavery in the United States.
Well, the 13th Amendment, as you just read, has almost universally been understood as the legislation that fundamentally ended 250 years of slavery. And therefore, the slavery loophole, which is the clause for punishment as a crime, has never really gotten the amount of scholarly or legal attention that it deserved. But in fact, it was activated literally overnight, within months of the end of the Civil War. The former Confederate States, as they were going through a process of Reconstruction, turned to new criminal statutes in order to re-enslave that population of African Americans. And so it's had incredible utility in the American political economy, both in the South and across the nation.
So let me then turn to Deborah Peterson Small. Why do you think that language was used there and continues to this day?
Well, I think the thing that we have to remember essentially is that racism is a product and in support of capitalism. And even though, and that slavery was basically a capitalist enterprise. And so from the very beginning of the period after which Black people were legally no longer enslaved, the same economic forces were looking for ways to continue to profit from free labor. And so this exception in the statute regarding the ability to punish a person for conviction of a crime created the perfect opportunity. And I think it's important to remember that the kinds of crimes that Black people were being locked up for and convicted of were things like vagrancy, like stealing a pig, like doing basic kind of survival crimes or misdemeanor offenses, many of the same kinds of things that are currently being used by our prison industrial complex to support mass incarceration.
Thank you. We see this historical issue that we're dealing with in this nation. You see, as we stated, the Black population has historically been disregarded and abused and overlooked. Its past and present are still marked by white supremacy, which displays itself in various ways. This includes, but is not limited to, racism in the legal system, law enforcement, sports, buying homes, or educational institutions, or healthcare, etc. Some members of the Black population have successfully navigated their way through the struggle and persevered, yet there are many who are not connected and moving in a positive way. Historically, people are facing the stress of an unjust world, but we still function and move forward physically, emotionally, and mentally. Next slide, please. There's a video. Anybody familiar with Parchment, Mississippi? Oh, let me slow my roll. During my research for my dissertation, the title of the dissertation was Nonviolent African American Male Ex-Offenders, Phenomenological Investigation on Employment Discrimination. And I had to do, I did interviews, and I had 15 individuals that I had to interview. I would not call their names or anything like that whatsoever because I signed papers not to do that. But I had one young man who spent 17 years in Parchment, Mississippi. And while he was there in Parchment, it was known as one of the worst places in the country as a penal system, next to Angola, which is in Louisiana. But the time that he was there 17 years, he told me he basically picked and planted sweet potatoes and did it for years. And sometimes individuals might get tired or sick or hurt, you know, but yet the forces there inside law enforcement forced many to go to work when they couldn't, you know, were sick. And some would even be punished for not being able to get up and go to work. So if you click on that. I want to go about halfway through because it's about 3 minutes long. Go ahead. About a minute and a half. Oh, no, yeah. So cut your killing down. I'll build your fire. I'll put your wall. That foggy bar. So I will do your cooking. is a parchment that was 1963, Parchment, Mississippi, on the plantation, excuse me. Penitentiary plantation, not a Freudian slip, but the same thing. If you just remember some of the stories that you read of in the past, and you've seen cinematography throw different movies your way, this sounds just like what Tom Sawyer and would sound like probably at that particular time. And this was 1963 in Mississippi at Parchment State Penitentiary. And as a matter of fact, during the pandemic, there were some major atrocities that happened in Parchment, where men were dying left and right. People were also given the COVID shot, but they were given overdoses like some of the people here in Iowa went through. We had an issue here in Iowa during the pandemic where nurses used the wrong amounts on people. So basically, once some of the people are institutionalized, they are almost, to tell the truth, guinea pigged while they are incarcerated, because you are the property of the state. Would you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Richmond, Texas, not too far from where I grew up. No one cares, because they're labeled as the misfits of society. Would you go to the next slide, please? The carceral state, from the perspective, from Afrocentric perspective, since the transatlantic slave trade, and we looking at 1455 to go back far as we possibly can, where Pope Nicholas V wrote the papal bull in 1455, commissioning Alfonso V of Portugal to go into West Africa and take human cargo and bring them here to the Western Hemisphere for perpetual servitude. Okay, and that's how the Roman Catholic Church got started and made a bunch of money, and how the transatlantic slave trade got to moving. It was due to the cause that the Moors were defeated in Spain, because the Moors had controlled Spain for 800 years prior to that Inquisition. And Pope Nicholas was happy that Portugal and Spain defeated the Moors, who basically were a group of people that helped save Europe, to tell the truth. If you have some time, you can do some research and look up about the Moors when they came to Europe and how they helped to save Europe from the bubonic plague. Okay. This here, like I said, is a carceral state. When individuals who are been through the carceral system, even when they are released, they are still carceral citizens unless they have received voting rights. Many are still carceral, even if you are released from prison and you're dealing with restorative justice, you're still a part of the prison system until you're no longer on probation, on parole. So this nation, as a matter of fact, many of the European nations opened up some of their prisons to send people here to come here and explore and navigate in this area and to establish colonies here in the Western Hemisphere and even around the planet. Okay? Next slide, please. Okay. We're looking at something here. The hidden workforce. A lot of us here are not aware that the goods that these prisoners produce wind up in the supply chain of a dazzling array of products found in American kitchens. You can look at Frosted Flakes, Ballpark Franks, Gold Medal flour, Coca-Cola, Riceland rice. A lot of food products are coming from prison. They are also shelved in virtually every supermarket in our country, which would include Kroger, Target, Aldi's, and Whole Food. They happen to be obtaining products from prison labor. Okay, we also see some of these goods are exported and included to countries that some producers that block them, but because they have prison labor, they make ways of getting around things to sell their products. Some prisoners work on the same plantation soil where slaves harvest cotton, tobacco, and sugar cane more than 160 years ago. With some of the present-day images that look eerie from the past. For instance, looking at this particular picture right here, we're going to get into this video. It's going to show us some things that we're going to talk about here. Will you click on that for me, please?
Turning Tyson's Foods. There we go. A hidden, intricate web links hundreds of popular food brands to work done by U.S. prisoners. A 2-year Associated Press investigation found that everything from grains, meat, eggs, and milk had been grown, harvested, or produced by incarcerated people. And their labor finds its way into the supply chains of some of the most recognized brands and largest food companies in the world. We followed as cattle raised at the Louisiana State Penitentiary were transported to a meat processor in Texas. From there, the beef ended up in the supply chains of McDonald's, Burger King, and major grocery stores.
I feel like I had become a slave, a product of the convict system, because everything that I was doing was profiting the prison.
The 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime. We spoke to prisoners who were working on the same plantation soil where slaves toiled more than 150 years ago. Many were making pennies an hour. Some were getting nothing at all. Others were being contracted out to private companies for taking part in work release programs. Prisoners can sometimes be punished for refusing to work, even thrown into solitary confinement.
Anytime you bump it,
And if they are hurt on the job, they often have little recourse.
They aren't eligible for workers' compensation, nor are they protected by other worker safety laws because they're not considered quote-unquote employees.
We're going to have to figure out different ways to make our system a better system instead of just exploiting labor and then calling it crime.
The agriculture sector is just a fraction of the overall prison labor industry, which includes everything from public works to stamping license plates.
They're learning a skill set. They're learning to be responsible for something. They're learning to pay back their debt to society.
I learned that if I wanted to be better, I have to make my own way, basically. That the opportunities are here. They're not going to give them to me.
But prisons and corporations benefit from inmate labor. The goods wind up in the supply chains of giants like Walmart, Target, Whole Foods, and Costco, just to name a few. The AP also found American prison labor linked to the supply chains of multinational companies such as Cargill that export goods all over the world. This is happening even though Washington has banned imports and seized goods that were produced by prison or forced labor abroad.
DHS is deeply concerned by credible and growing reports of China's state-sponsored use of forced labor and other human rights violations in the Xinjiang region.
Several companies told the AP they have policies in place restricting suppliers from using incarcerated workers. Cargill acknowledged buying goods from American prison farms and said it would determine next steps. Others said they would look into the AP's findings, which revealed just how much prison labor touches many of the foods we eat.
Many are not aware of these things. That's why this particular presentation is here to open eyes about factual information regarding what's happening in the correctional system, what they call it, the prison system. They call it corrections, but I wouldn't call it that. Right here we see, as we stated, a lot of these particular brands and products that are being overlooked, that are being furnished to our tables, are done by people who are making maybe 17 cents an hour, or less if they're making that. From a matter of fact, from my research and dealing with some of the people here in Iowa that I talked to and incarcerated, they stated that the top pay sometimes is around about 50 cents an hour. So you make about $4 a week if you're working hard, and everything costs. But still, individual who has been incarcerated and is incarcerated might have a family and might have some children, and then the child support continues to allocate and get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then the individual comes out. When he's released, and then he comes out, and then he's trying to find employment, and then you have these outrageous bills that you got to pay when you're already in the hole. But that's what happens in society. Will you click on that one there, please? Thank you.
This milk is 100% Jersey, from Jersey-born cows raised and milked on Jersey farms. Even the farm staff never leave New Jersey. They can. They're incarcerated. The New Jersey Department of Corrections is the largest farmer in the state, supplying milk and processed foods to state departments at lower rates than commercial farms. Working on the farms is a privilege for minimum security prisoners who have almost completed their sentences.
Like, I don't miss a day of work just so I can come out here, you know? If I have the choice, I'll come every day.
Prisoners are up before dawn to feed and milk the cows and work all day. But it's a good gig, way better than being in a prison cell. And many prisoners from strictly urban cities grow to love it.
This is Chiquita. This is the one that loved to be great. Like mother, don't she love to be great? This is my baby here.
You got a real gentle with me. I'm from Trey, actually. I'm from the urban. I've never been on a farm. Never thought I would, but it's not as bad as you would think. If I go out to Penny running circles, they all start following me and jumping me. Like, they're just like kids.
You know, everybody has to realize, man, these guys do have a true, meaningful value. And when they work here, they learn it and they feel it. And it's rewarding. It's rewarding to them and to the staff.
Baby, like show, baby, mama, baby, like show, baby. It's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. be all right. Hop ahead. Hop.
I was a farm in Trenton, New Jersey, and the picture on the other side was a picture of Angola prison in Louisiana. Any of y'all remember a movie that Paul Newman played in called Cool Hand Luke? You remember Cool Hand? We who are old enough know Cool Hand Luke was Paul Newman played the movie, and that movie was done on the same set of Angola State Penitentiary there in Louisiana, and I know I'm nostalgic. My wife, she tells me now. I go back and like to look at some of those old movies and stuff like that. But that is one of my, it was one of my favorite movies of looking about prison life. On here is some of the peer review articles that I have listed from the information that I have. If you like, you can take a photo of it. All of these articles and all of these links will take you right directly to most of the information that was brought forth here. What I say in the end and looking at what's happening and how carceral farming affects the populace is that if we follow the money, the business of prison labor is so vast and convoluted that tracing the money can be challenging. Some agricultural programs regularly go into the red, raising questions and demanding audits and prompting investigations into potential corruption and mismanagement of general inefficiencies. Nearly half of the agricultural goods produced in Texas from 2014 to 2018 lost money. For example, a similar report in Louisiana covers loss of $3.8 million between fiscal year 2016 to 2018. A separate federal investigation into the graft at the for-profit farm in Louisiana Correctional Department led to the jailing of 2 employees. Correctional officials steep farming. Steep farming expenditures are unpredictable and variable, like dealing with weather, and it can affect the profit on your profit margin because of what's going on in farming. And we look also at that prison labor began during slavery and exploded as incarceration rate soared, disproportionately affecting people of color, as laws have steadily changed to make it easier for private companies to tap into the swelling captive workforce. It has grown into a multi-billion-dollar industry that operates with little oversight. So it affects us, it affects the populace because we eat because someone else is working. It's not just all prison farmers. We have farmers all over the country and all over the world, but here in the United States, the disproportionate issue, looking at 71% of the people who are incarcerated in the United States are people of color. And if you break it down in 2022, it was 41% of the people who were incarcerated in the United States were African American. Of that 41% of the people who were incarcerated, when you divide the male-female amongst the African Americans who were incarcerated, 94% men, 6% women. Here in the U.S., a lot of black women say, where are the black men? A lot of them are locked up. And it's a historical fact, and it continues to perpetuate. I hear people talk about prison reform, and reform is not going to help us. We have to find another way, another way of doing things. So I'm open for questions if anyone has any questions or comments. Feel free to speak up.
Do you have any statistics on the Iowa prisons,
The carceral farming here in Iowa. I have not that much data on prison farming here in Iowa because I know Cargill is a major organization in Cargill. With all the farm products here in Iowa, I'm inclined to believe that there has to be some data that I could have pulled up, but I didn't really find it at that time. I know the Iowa prison industries is constantly producing different products and furniture. And they're even building modular homes. Yeah, so as a member of Habitat for Humanity here, I have talked to officials with the Iowa prison industry and also talking to Habitat about creating a collaboration because we have individuals when they're in Newton State Prison, that's when they're about to be released, and that's where they're creating these modular homes. And it makes sense to have someone who has the skill set to build a house when they come out, give them an opportunity to make a serious wage so they won't return and recidivate back into prison. There's other ways we can really do things, but many people are just stuck into the ways of old and not looking for innovative ideas. Any questions, any more comments? No questions, no comments. Well, I just want to tell you thank you. Not because I don't want to prolong your day, but we were here to bring some information forth. I hope it was informative and enlighten you in a way about some things that's happening around us that a lot of people are unaware of. So I want to thank Silos and Smokestacks and also the African American Museum of Iowa for sponsoring this event. The third leg of this particular lecture series is going to deal with Senate File 96, dealing with the Black Farmers Act of 2023. There is money that's supposed to be allocated to black farmers. As a matter of fact, I'm inclined to believe it's $500,000 for certain farmers if they, yes, sir.
I noticed on the flyer that the platforms were in other cities as well. Do they follow the same format as you as far as like speaking on the same topic? Because I know you go, somebody's going to, who's doing the one in Cedar Rapids?
I'm doing those. I've been going for
you.
Yeah. I did the one in Waterloo a couple of weeks ago in Waterloo, and this is the second leg here. And the final one will be on June the 16th in Cedar Rapids at the African American Museum. And like my wife let me know, that's Father's Day. So we're going to be doing Father's Day in Cedar Rapids. That's all right with me. As long as I got my wife with me, I don't care.
I would like to see different, we can't control people's choices and decisions on why they go to prison, but the reform that is something that could be very beneficial, and you doing your thing. Maybe I won't call it that Negus, but it's a sad scenario that's happening, and it seems like things are swept under the rug, but there is and does need to be some more things allocated, resources for people when they get out of prison, so they don't reoffend or
It makes sense. I'm getting you. It makes sense because, especially people who come from marginalized communities, because they leave an area and been institutionalized for a number of years, and they come back to the same community quite often where there was nothing there in the first place. So, yeah, coming back to nothing. So if you're coming back to nothing, what you getting ready to get into? Something that's subterranean to try to make some type of capital. That's what's happening. Yes, ma'am.
So I wanted to go back to this gentleman's question about data in Iowa. The most recent data regarding prison farming that's available is 1998. However, it does say that at that time, the Iowa Department of Corrections was responsible for 12 farms, and each prison, except for Fort Dodge and Mount Pleasant, had a farm. The farms ranged in size from 10 acres, used for gardening at Oakdale, to more than 1,400 acres at Enamosa. And the Department of Corrections retained responsibility for 4 farms owned by the Department of Human Services after becoming a separate department in the 80s. So that was 1998.
98.
Yeah.
Okay. 98. I think I'm 38, 98. We're going back. We're going back, so that just shows you we don't know what's going on. And to keep citizenry uninformed is a problem. We need to be informed about what's going on around us. And that's why smokestacks and silos and African American Museum of Iowa helped to promote this. I thank you all for coming out, and whoever might be there virtually, y'all have a great day, and keep hope alive, like Jesse said. Y'all have a great day, everybody.